People have been arrested in connection with this case.
For bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Richie Allen.
Thanks, Ollie. Welcome to the Richie Allen Show. How you doing? It's 5 o'clock it's 3 minutes past 5 as I speak with you live this Tuesday, September 4th, 2018. From now on in, as I talked about last night on the programme, and as I wrote about today on the website, the programme will broadcast for 2 hours, Monday to Thursday between 5 and 7. Hopefully no loss in quality. Although that's for you to say, not for me to say. Format even doesn't change. I've got 2 terrific guests lined up for you today. I think you'll be interested in hearing what they have to say. Christ, I could be a rapper. Let's get on with Tuesday's programmes then. Thanks for joining me.
Asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv. It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Now, about 4 years ago, I bet you don't remember this. I bet you don't. Don't lie to me, you don't remember. Rabbi Ahron Cohen was on this program because he was talking a lot about the crimes of the Israeli government and the IDF in bombarding Gaza and killing hundreds of people, men, women and children. They called it Operation Protective Edge. He's an Orthodox Jew. And he was targeted for that here in Manchester. He was beaten up badly and his car was burned out. Now, he's got a lot to say about the accusations of anti-Semitism against Jeremy Corbyn and the UK's Labour Party. And he joins me this hour to talk about that. Rabbi Ahron Cohen on the programme this hour from Manchester. And in hour 2, we're off to Chicago because Stephen Lendman will be there live. Now, Russia has begun bombing Idlib in Syria ahead of a possible all-out offensive by Syrian army forces to try and rid Idlib and rid Syria of al-Nusra, al-Qaeda and ISIS. Foreign-backed, of course, mercenaries have caused so much trouble and caused so many problems. 500,000 lives lost, they reckon. Maybe that's conservative in Syria in the last 7, 8, 9 years. So Stephen Lendman is all over this, great journalist. He joins me in the second hour. It's Tuesday's programme, your Richie Allen Show, live on Fab Radio 2 on richieallen.co.uk. And of course, we're on triggerwarning.tv and TuneIn Radio as well. It's always good to be with you. Thanks for tuning in early, and I hope you'll get used to it. All right. I'm not going to say any more about it. There's an article on the website, and I spoke about it last night. Before I carry on today, just a quick word on Jordan Maxwell, because I did notice 1 or 2 tweets were saying to me, Richie, what about Jordan? Now, I spoke with Jordan last night after the programme. Had a good chat with him. Great man. I love him. It's well known that I love Jordan. I've known him for many years. I have enormous respect for him and the things that he has said and written over the years. He's been in poor health and he's not had a great time of it of late. And because of that, he's not been doing much in terms of speaking and radio broadcasting. But he is going to come on the programme next week sometime. And he's enamoured of this earlier start. It suits him. He's in Arizona at the moment. So for those of you who were saying, where's Jordan? You used to have him on every couple of months. Are you not having him on anymore? Of course we'll have him on, but he hasn't been well. Now, Labour's national executive were meeting today to decide on anti-Semitism definitions. You probably know this, I'm sure. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition was incorporated into Labour's Code of Conduct back in July, but Labour did not adopt all of the IHRA's examples. Labour left out 4 of their 11 examples of what it is to be anti-Semitic, right? The things Labour didn't want to adopt included accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel than to the interests of their own nations. You see, the IHRA said that is anti-Semitic if you say that. Labour said, well, we don't want to adopt that. Labour didn't agree that denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavour. Labour didn't want to adopt that. Requiring of Israel a behaviour not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. And finally, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. Those were the 4 examples Labour said that, Jeremy Corbyn and the hard left, I suppose, in the Labour Party said they wouldn't adopt those examples. Now, apparently, and if this happens while I'm on air, I'll bring you the news as soon as I have it. Apparently, the Labour executive will agree to adopt the full definition today, including those 4 examples, but Labour will attach a caveat, a kind of a little footnote, saying that free speech is free speech and people should be allowed to say what it is they feel and they should be able to criticise Israel and all the rest of it. Sounds to me like Jeremy Corbyn and Seamus Milne and all of those folks are backing down in the face of an avalanche, a never-ending wave of accusations that the Labour Party is anti-Semitic. So there are 2 different groups of people outside this meeting today. You have various Zionist groups there calling for Jeremy Corbyn's head, and you have others basically backing Corbyn and saying they agree with him. Now, a couple of things I heard today that I found very interesting and I think are worth exploring. I think you might be interested too. Simon Johnson is the CEO of the Jewish Leadership Council. He was on Sky News, and he's a vehement critic of Jeremy Corbyn, is Simon Johnson, the CEO of the Jewish Leadership Council. I repeat, he talks here about the need for security at Jewish schools and businesses, which I found quite strange. Simon Johnson.
There are guards outside Jewish schools today on the first day of term and outside our synagogues. That's every day of the year. Now, this definition is intended to protect the Jewish community. That threat that we face because there are people who want to do harm to Jewish people or who want to punish the Jews for their perceived issues that they have with Israel. Now, because the Labour Party has spent the summer nitpicking over this definition of anti-Semitism, they are in danger of showing that they think it's more important to protect the freedom of speech of those who hate Israel than it is to protect the Jews in the Jewish community against the threat that we face that require us to have guards outside our schools and outside our places of worship.
Now, Simon Johnson might be genuinely convinced of what he says, the Jewish Leadership Council, but I think it's nonsense. And I contacted him today on Twitter, and to be fair to him, he extended me the courtesy of a reply. I said to him on Twitter, I said, Simon, there's zero evidence that there is an existential threat to UK Jews. Guards at schools and synagogues is simply hysteria and fear-mongering. Where is the evidence or the statistics to back up your claims that Jews are under constant threat? Just the facts, man, please, I tweeted. And he got back to me, Simon Johnson, and he tweeted, the facts are that there are guards at Jewish schools, synagogues and communal buildings. That is on advice from police and security services. That is factual. We are not exaggerating that. So that was a kind of a clever way of dodging what I was getting at in my tweet. I'm not disputing the fact that there are security guards at Jewish schools and synagogues. I'm questioning the need for it. And he didn't want to get into that. I tweeted him back. And I said, because he said that the security guards are there on advice from police and from the security services. So I tweeted back and said, advice based on what, Simon? And I ask respectfully, I respect your right to your opinion, but crimes against Jews are not on the increase. I would hope that you would demand from the police and the services that they provide some evidence to justify their recommendations. And I got no further reply from him there. Now, I've been talking about the paradigm shift to a post-fact world for years. That's a phrase I coined, by the way. I'm taking credit for that. About 3.5 years ago, I started saying that. We exist now in a post-fact world. Facts don't matter. The police and the spooks have told Jewish groups that they are in imminent danger. But have they offered any evidence to those groups? You see, I would say, if you want me to be scared, matey, and if you want me to live in fear, matey, show me why I should be scared and why I should be looking under my bed. But that won't happen, because you see, the post-fact world is a world where people can claim anything. Now, you heard a snippet of Simon Johnson there. I heard the whole interview. At no time did the presenter, Jane Secker, ask him, why? Why do you need security? Where's the threat? It isn't from ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Al-Nusra, who have a strange aversion to all things Jewish, which is all a bit mysterious to me, seeing as Jews should be their mortal enemy. Now, I don't want to see attacks on Jews or anybody else, but it's all very strange, isn't it? Who are they protecting themselves from with security at the schools and at the synagogues? Now, also on television today was Ken Livingstone, the former mayor of London, suspended, you might remember, from the Labour Party for no good reason, for doing nothing wrong. Now, Ken's appearance on Sky News was pretty fascinating today. He first of all reminds the presenter, Jane Secker again, that it's all a load of monumental bollocks and that the official figures show clearly that anti-Semitism, save for a few Egypts, is actually pretty much non-existent. Ken Livingstone.
Yeah, what I find remarkable about all of this is that we had 80 Jewish Labour Party members publish a letter when this row erupted saying that in all their centuries together in the Labour Party, none of them had ever heard or seen anything anti-Semitic. Now, I was talking to a senior party official just before I resigned. He was saying that out of 500,000 members, they found about 50 that have tweeted something anti-Semitic. Now, that's 1 out of every 10,000. The simple fact is, if you're anti-Semitic or homophobic or racist, you're not going to join the Labour Party, because people like Jeremy and myself have spent our entire political careers challenging every form of discrimination.
Do you think that's true, really? I mean, goodness me, to suggest that nobody in the Labour Party is anti-Semitic or racist seems an extraordinary claim. I mean, you couldn't say that about any political party, could you?
He never said that. She's either a bit dim or working to a script. He never said that there were 0 incidents of it in his party. This is what he said.
Well, as I said, they found about 50 Labour Party members who've tweeted something anti-Semitic out of over 500,000.
Yeah, 50 out of 500,000, he said. But dimwit presenter says, how can you say that? There's no anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. He never said that at all. It's non-existent. In real terms, it's non-existent. 50 fools out of 500,000 people saying things, whatever they're saying. Ken then took the opportunity to remind her and everybody else that he was suspended, remember, for citing a historical fact.
I was suspended by the Labour Party General Secretary on the allegation I'd said Hitler was a Zionist. And 2.5 years later, I'm still seeing that lie repeated in The Guardian, the Financial Times, The Observer, on the Huffington Post website. Only in all this time since then, not a single journalist has ever phoned me to say, did you actually say Hitler was a Zionist? Not once.
Did you?
Of course not. How could anyone say a man who loathed Jews all his life was a Zionist? I mean, the simple fact is, I referred to the fact that in 1933, the German Zionists signed a deal with Hitler's government in which they collaborated on moving 60,000 German Jews to live in Palestine. OK, we're not going to tinker around over history. I know, it's a long time ago. Up, Ken. And let's not go into it all now. I mean, we're talking about the Labour Party in the present at the moment. Briefly before you go, Ken. In fact, he might have been kept on for another couple of minutes, but because he brought up the Havre agreement again, let's not go down that road again, Ken. God forbid you go down that road and you acknowledge that the man never said anything remotely hateful or racist. He couldn't have said anything anti-Semitic. Let's not get into the Jews are not Semites argument. It's true, but I'm tired of it, and I'm sure you are as well. Let's not go over that again, she says. So this is what's been happening. Now, it's 17 minutes past the hour. 17 minutes past 5 UK time as I'm speaking. Well, it's coming up for 18 minutes past 5. And as of yet, the Labour Party, the National Executive, hasn't broken up or hasn't
hasn't disbanded, so we don't know whether they have adopted this full IHRA definition and accepted that they must incorporate the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's anti-Semitism definition into Labour's Code of Conduct. We don't know yet, because we just don't know, because they haven't broken up yet. I thought they would have done this around about 5 minutes to 5 to get the national news at 5 p.m. But as of yet, nothing from Labour. I'm monitoring live news channels as I'm speaking with you. Multitasker extraordinaire. The Richie Allen Show on Fab Radio 2, TuneIn Radio, triggerwarning.tv, and of course richieallen.co.uk. Now in the second hour we'll be talking to Stephen Lendman about the imminent offensive on Idlib, which is the last of the rebel-held. You gotta love the BBC and its bull spit. It's garbage. It's nonsense. Rebel-held, says the BBC. There are no rebels. There are lunatic, head-chopping jihadists, bad men, armed and trained by France, the UK, Israel and the United States. They are no rebels. Anyway, they are all that's left. Apparently there's about 10,000 of them, and they're in Idlib, and the Syrian government is about to mount a massive offensive to try and rid Idlib and pretty much rid the country once and for all of these mercenaries, these lunatics, right? So the Russians have been bombing the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which, if you've listened to this programme before, is absolutely hilarious. This is a t-shirt seller in Coventry in the United Kingdom. It's so ridiculous, it's hard to fathom, it's hard to countenance that we live in a world where the mainstream media takes information on Syria from a little chubby bloke in Coventry who sells t-shirts, who was expelled from his own country. He was imprisoned there. But he's talking about the white helmets are already in action. Don't get me started on the white helmets. No heroes. No conscientious volunteers are the white helmets. There's something far more sinister, which has been discussed on this programme many times in the last couple of years. It's all lies. So anyway, Bashar al-Assad, this is going to be, I suppose, the end game, if all goes to plan. But Donald Trump and the US government has been warning him against launching such an attack, calling it reckless. Trump has been tweeting about the possibility that hundreds of thousands of lives might be lost. And of course, there's no doubt a lot of people are going to die. This is terrible. We can't imagine it. Not those of us living in the West. Not those of us brought up in County Waterford in the Republic of Ireland. Not those of us brought up in Manchester. Alien to us what's going on in that country. But it's going to happen. The Syrian government is on the right side of this historically, as are the Russians and the Iranians. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens. But more on this with Stephen Lendman in the second hour. This is the Richie Allen Show. Very quick break. Going to be speaking with Rabbi Ahron Cohen in a couple of minutes. You don't want to miss him. Very important stuff, this.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
Alrighty then, here's a bit of Steve Earle. This is your Richie Allen Show. Great to be with you this Tuesday, September 4th. Going to be talking with Rabbi Ahron Cohen. He's in Manchester about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party in a couple of minutes' time. Stick around. Music from Steve Earle there, Even When I'm Blue, on the Richie Allen Show. Now, there is a bit of breaking news coming out, and it's to do with the big story today. The Labour National Executive meeting to decide whether or not to adopt all of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance examples of anti-Semitism. Multiple bureaus reporting in the last 60 seconds that Labour has adopted all of the IHRA's examples of anti-Semitism. Talked about this extensively today and yesterday. Right, let me welcome back to the programme a gentleman who's not been with us for a few years. I first spoke to him about 4 years ago when he suffered some very serious personal physical attacks because of his opposition to the so-called Operation Protective Edge, where the Israeli government, the Israeli army, bombarded Gaza with a great loss of life back in 2014. He was physically assaulted at the time and his car was set alight. We talked at length about that at that time. He is an Orthodox Jewish rabbi and a member of Neturei Karta. I'm delighted to welcome back to the programme Rabbi Ahron Cohen. Rabbi, welcome back to the programme. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thanks for
I hope you are.
I'm very well, sir. Thanks for coming on the programme again. Good to be with you. One of the things that strikes me, I wanted to ask you straight up, is in recent weeks, we've seen various spokesmen and sometimes spokeswomen allegedly representing certain Jewish communities in the UK, in London, in the Midlands. And one of the claims made is that because of this alleged anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, one of the claims being made is that Jewish men and women have never felt more fearful for their future here in the UK and that many of them want to leave. Has that been your experience as a Jewish man in Manchester? Are Manchester's Jews fearful of their future under a Labour government if Labour comes to power, or fearful because of some perceived rise in anti-Semitism? What say you?
No, I would say that we don't have any perception of an increase in anti-Semitism at all. What I would like to say is that we have to understand this problem of being afraid of anti-Semitism. The problem is that if you allow me a minute or two to explain myself.
Take your time, Rabbi. Go ahead. Take your time. You have all the time in the world.
Okay, thank you very much. Anti-Semitism is very old. It goes back. It's in existence as long as the Jewish nation has been in existence, and it's basically the description given in the definition given in the IHRA document is quite correct. The basic definition, I'm not going into the examples, but the basic definition is quite correct. But it's a bigoted, old bigoted approach. But it was against Jews, and the point is, what do we call Jews? What were Jews and what are Jews? Now, the Jewish nation is thousands of years old, and the identity of Jewish people was always their adherence, their being members of the Jewish nation and adherence to the Jewish religion. Anybody who dropped out of the Jewish religion lost his Jewish identity, and this was the case right up to 150 years ago at the beginning of the Zionist idea. But then the Zionists came along, a secular movement, and not religious, and they found a new way for people to have an identity, a so-called Jewish identity, that you can be Zionist and you can be a Jew, but you don't have to have any adherence to the Jewish religion. And this is sadly attractive to a lot of people. And they now, what became was a new form of Jew, but nothing to do with the original form of Jew. It's only a shell of the original form of Jew. But that's the Judaism that exists, sadly, in practically all over the world, except for a minority. I mean, there's still a strong minority of Orthodox Jews, but the majority of Jews are come under that category. They are members of this shell form of Judaism, which is Zionism, and that is their Judaism. Now, because it's their Judaism, and since anti-Semitism has been in existence for thousands of years, but they only have one form of Judaism, so therefore any criticism of their form of Judaism now becomes anti-Semitism. But it's not. It's anti-Zionism. Now, Zionism is a purely secular, harsh nationalist concept. And in fact, has been described, and one can describe it quite well, as a nationalist and racist concept. But of course, these Jewish people who have left the fold, and their only connection with Judaism is Zionism, they will object to that definition, but that is a fact. Now, therefore, what we have now then is, and the Zionists have been very successful in persuading the world at large to conflate the modern movement, or known as Zionism, with Judaism.
How have they managed that, Rabbi? My apologies for the interruption. This is really interesting stuff. How have Zionists managed to convince the wider world that their version, their definition of Judaism is real, is right, and is not to be challenged? How have they managed to do that? How have they become so influential?
Well, you ask a very good question, and I always call that one of the puzzles of the 21st century. But they are superb propagandists. They have a superb propaganda machine, and they've been doing it for 100 years. When they first started, they were only a very small movement as far as the general Jewish nation was concerned, but they've been very, very successful in persuading people that is what Judaism is, and it's Zionism. And they've also been successful among Orthodox Jews. Although Orthodox Jews have kept up the old form of Judaism, but many of them have adopted Zionism as being part of Judaism, but it's a bolt-on. It's a false addition to Judaism. But the problem is, as I was saying before, that any criticism of Zionism has now become anti-Semitism. But it is wrong. It is a total mistake. It's criticism of Zionism. Is criticism of a secular nationalist movement, no different than any other secular nationalist movement in any other country, in any other group of people. And if they don't behave as they should, they are severely criticized, just like the South African regime, the apartheid regime, was criticized. It was a very strong nationalist form of nationalism, and it was criticized, and eventually it came to an end. And really, ideally, if the world had any sense, in our view, if the world had any sense, they would realize that the two things, nationalism, Judaism and Zionism, should not be conflated, and they should look on the Israeli regime as they looked on the South African apartheid regime, and they shouldn't be afraid of being accused of being anti-Semites, because they're not. It's not a proper Judaism. It's a shell of Judaism that existed at one time.
Now, lamentably, Rabbi, by the way, let me just remind our listeners, Rabbi Ahron Cohen is live on the programme from Manchester. It's good to have the Rabbi back on the programme. Lamentably, we don't have the other side of this argument, because programs like ours, and we've invited the campaign against anti-Semitism to come on, the Northwest Friends of Israel to come on, and rather than come on and debate like adults and speak to their feelings and why they believe what it is they believe, they'd rather throw accusations at programs like this, claim that we're biased, rather than come on and have a debate. So that's why they're not here. Let me put something to you, and I want to come back to this Zionism against, as opposed to Judaism, in a few minutes' time. Simon Johnson, you'll be aware, is the CEO of the Jewish Leadership Council. Now, I was tweeting him today, and to his credit, he came back to me. And he said, whether we like it or not, the fact is the police and the security services have told Jewish leaders in this country that they need security at their synagogues and schools because there is an existential threat to Jews and it's on the rise. He said to me, this is not an exaggeration, this is absolutely factual. And to just take that one step further, he might say to me that it's easy for an Irish guy to be saying there's no real threat to Jews and that when people criticise Israel, they really mean it. He might say, well, no, people are getting more clever and people who hate Jews are getting more clever and they're using the term Zionist, in a kind of a pretense that we're having a go at the Israeli government, when really they genuinely blame Jews for the ills of the world, for their own shortcomings, and, they ultimately hate Jews. That's what Simon Johnson would say. That's what Gideon Falter at the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism would say. They would say, we're being disingenuous. Hatred of Jews is on the rise, not only on the far right, but on the far left. What do you say to that?
Well, yes, there definitely are probably and have always been I would say the comparatively small minority of people who hate Jews with the bigoted hatred which has existed for thousands of years. There have been periods when it's been very strong, as we sadly have experienced in our own time, how it developed and came to a crescendo in the Nazi Holocaust. But actually, since the Second World War, this old bigoted form of hatred of Judaism has practically disappeared. But what has come in its place is criticism of the actions of the Zionist state of Israel, and it could well have aroused a new form of anti-Semitism. But not per se, not because the bigoted form of hatred is on the rise. The actions of the Zionist state and the Zionists are, I would say, the biggest underlying cause of what might be perceived as being anti-Semitism in this day and age, but certainly not. There isn't a basic, certainly not active manifestation of the old bigoted anti-Semitism.
I wonder, Rabbi, is there a kind of this is a strange concept now, a kind of a subconscious revulsion for Israel based on the fact that it continually gets away with, now my feelings on this are well known to my audience, it continually gets away with the most unspeakable crimes against its own citizens, let's be honest about it. And it does do. And you get maybe lip service from people like the UK Prime Minister, maybe the Irish Taoiseach. You get, a little condemnation maybe from the United Nations. But ultimately, Israel gets away with it and carries on to do it again and again and again. I wonder how much of that is driving anti-Israeli feeling, the sort of feeling that's claimed to be hatred of Jews but isn't. What do you think?
Well, I would go along with that one, absolutely. I would say that the underlying cause of so-called rise in anti-Semitism in this present age is the very all the facts that you have mentioned in connection with the state of Israel. And I would go as far as to say that the underlying cause the underlying cause of strife in the Middle East is the very existence of the State of Israel, which was set up in such an, first of all, it's against our religion. That's just by the way, against it, as you probably know, it's against our teaching and our religion. Our belief in religion is that we do not form a state of our own. We are in a divinely decreed exile. But apart from that, on humanitarian grounds, the State of Israel was founded right from the start, from the Balfour Declaration, against the wishes of the indigenous population, and that is compounded and caused confrontation and caused bloodshed. And I would say the very existence of the State of Israel as a state, I'm not talking about the people who live there, but the very concept of a political, nationalistic, Zionistic state is the underlying cause of strife in the Middle East.
Here's an interesting concept. You talked earlier on about ancient bigotry, and I mean, I remember when I was a young man in secondary school, in high school in Ireland, we used to talk about, the old stereotypes and the Nazi propaganda and those fairly dreadful cartoons of the Jew with the big nose counting the gold coins, this nonsense that, Jews as a collective were sitting around plotting to steal all the world's wealth and hoard all the money from themselves. This was nonsense, and it was propaganda designed to make, obviously, German people hate Jews. But Zionists as a group have been very successful in terms of their influence on the media and also their influence in and on finance. Now, this is obviously a very dangerous area for any broadcaster, because Jews listening to this could say, oh, there's Richie now, he's going to say that Jews control all the world's banks and all the world's finance, and Jews control all the world's television stations. No, they don't. I would be foolish to say that or to even think it. I don't. But do Zionists have a disproportionate influence on the financial world and the media world, do you think?
I would say there's no doubt about it. They have been, and they have a superb propaganda machine. They are very, very efficient people, and they have a tremendous influence on the media, and they could well have a tremendous influence on finances, but not because they are Jews, but because they are Zionists, which is a completely separate concept. And they've developed this harsh nationalistic concept which they push with tremendous skill and energy, and they have convinced so many nations of the world that they are the representatives of the Jewish people, but they are not. They've hijacked the name of the Jew, the true name of the Jewish people.
If I was there, I'd kiss you for saying that. I'll tell you why. Because from time to time, programs like this, we get accused of giving platforms to, hateful conspiracy theories. I love what you said. I'm, like yourself, I'm an educated man, went to university, and I'm a historian by qualification. I've said this 1,000 times, and I would never be so cowardly as to try and hide my real beliefs or my real feelings behind, a sort of a type of newspeak. The financial elites, whether they be the Warburg, Oppenheimer, Rothschild, banking dynasties, these are not Jewish people. They've got nothing to do with Judaism or Jewish people whatsoever. But they were very influential on Zionism and on the success of Zionism. But even when you say that or offer that as an opinion, which I do from time to time, people say, oh, you're just a racist who's hiding behind. No, I'm not. I'm not saying Rockefeller, Warburg, Oppenheimer, Rothschild as a Jewish conspiracy. It isn't, because they're not Jewish. And I think you were kind of touching on that there. Is it fair to say?
Yes, they are of Jewish extraction.
Yes, but they're not Jewish.
But they have left the fold of what is of the identity of a Jew as it has been thousands of years, and that has developed mainly from the advent of Zionism. And but the world has been deluded into thinking that is Judaism, but it's got nothing to do with Judaism. Completely different concept.
Yeah, I've always felt over the years, studying the period, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the Balfour Declaration, I've always felt that those behind the Zionist project used the dreadful plight of Jews in Germany in the 1920s and 30s and 40s to hide behind what it was they wanted to do and reflect or deflect that criticism away by saying, oh, when you challenge us, it's because you hate the Jews. They don't have any interest in the success of Jewish people or Judaism. That's what I fundamentally believe, Rabbi. But you know, when you say that in public, certain people don't want to hear that. It's a case of, no, you just hate the Jews. But it couldn't be further from the truth. What do you make of Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party today agreeing to adopt all of the international Holocaust remembrance examples?
My personal opinion is that I'm disappointed on a number of points. I mean, the basic definition is correct, and some of the examples given are also correct, but some of them are very questionable, particularly the ones referring to the State of Israel, because based on what we've just been saying, Israel, the State of Israel and Zionism is a completely different concept, and really they should not be brought in to the whole question of anti-Semitism whatsoever. So I think he's caved in a little bit, I think, perhaps for pragmatic reasons to pressure, because I think some of the examples are not correct, very much so. Having said that, I compliment Jeremy because he's really he's shown to be a man of principles. I mean, he's in a very difficult position, really, but I compliment him, and I would say to him, don't be cowed. Don't be cowed. You come out with what you think to be the truth, and be very, very clear on the difference between Zionism and Judaism. Don't take notice of the so-called Jewish quarters in this country who are criticizing him, but they are only criticizing him because of their Zionist affinity. Even ex-Chief Rabbi Sachs, that I mentioned earlier, that the Zionists have been so successful in their propaganda that they have succeeded in bringing over some of the religious Jews to their camp, who, as I mentioned earlier, have bolted Zionism onto Judaism. And that includes people like the current Chief Rabbi and Rabbi, ex-Chief Rabbi Sachs. They do not represent the true core of Jewish people and Judaism in any way whatsoever.
How much of a source of frustration is it for you then that while this program has a very healthy audience, we don't like to brag, but we do, it's got a healthy audience, but I'm not a national, at least not in this country. The program goes out all over Europe and around the world, but in this country I'm not on the national airwaves. So how frustrating is it for you that on BBC, ITV and Channel 4 we're getting the side of it, the Rabbi Sachs side of it, but we're not hearing from people like you? How frustrating is that?
Well, that's extremely frustrating. I mean, I would relish, not because I have any particular personal wish, but simply from the point of view of bringing out the truth, I would relish the opportunity of challenging Rabbi Sachs in a discussion, and it's extremely frustrating because, I've come across this now for a good number of years. The difficulty in getting the mainstream media to be prepared to stick their necks out and like you have done, and bring in other opinions which are, and I think it's because they're afraid of the backlash from the influential quarters that they are dependent upon.
Do you think free speech is in a very bad place? We've got probably 5 or 6 minutes left, and thanks for your time today. You see, I came up in commercial radio in Ireland, commercial and national radio, and I remember a time when everybody was given a platform, even people that we really disagreed with, and even people we might have found repugnant. I mean, I've interviewed Ku Klux Klan guys over the years. I mean, with some of the most outrageous and dreadful outlooks on life, these people. But I always felt, not to patronise them or to be condescending, I always felt, get all the opinions that are out there into the light and debate them like adults, and the silly and the wrongful and the bigoted opinions will just fall by the wayside if everybody is given a chance to honestly say what it is they want to say. But we seem to be moving into an era of censorship and an era of, identifying minority groups and saying, well, you can't speak about that group and you can't speak about that group. Do you think free speech is in serious jeopardy in these times, Rabbi?
Well, I certainly have that impression. I can tell you that, say, 10 years ago, I was quite frequently asked to talk to groups in universities, good number of universities all over the country. In fact, about 10 or so years ago, I gave a lecture in Cambridge University on this very subject, anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. I've still got a copy of the talk I gave at that time, but it wasn't a general subject for discussion. But as time has gone on, the invitations have petered out. There were occasions where I had invitations and then they were cancelled at the last minute. And there's obviously been influence in the background to say, no, this man can't come because he's going to say things that we don't agree with. And so I can only come to the conclusion that free speech is under threat.
God forbid that we hear something we might disagree with, Rabbi.
That's right.
How crazy is that?
Exactly.
When I went to university, we were constantly challenged by speakers coming who'd got, very different outlooks on geopolitics than we did. And we had robust debates that sometimes got very heated. But afterwards we had a beer and we said, right, I don't agree with you, but I'm glad that I listened to you. These days, it seems we're increasingly turning the phrase the kids use these days is snowflake. Nobody wants to be challenged anymore. Everybody wants to be cocooned and surrounded by opinions that they agree with, which is devastating for the truth, isn't it, and for advancement.
Yeah, and I think the major culprits in this trend is, in fact, the Zionism and the Zionists. They have managed to persuade people to muzzle free speech whenever it comes, whenever it's going to show them up in a bad light. They are, as I mentioned earlier, they're tremendously skillful in their propaganda machine, and they are one of the major culprits for producing this whole atmosphere of muzzling free speech.
Just before you go, one very final question. When we spoke last time, it wasn't the best of times for you. You had to put up with the dreadful, disgusting physical attack on yourself and the vandalism because you were speaking up for the plight of the Palestinians under that aerial bombardment. Have you had to put up with any more of that, or have things quietened down since we last spoke?
Yes, they've quietened down on the surface. I mean, I have no doubt that if I was to give another public talk as I did at that time, I haven't had the opportunity hasn't arisen so much since then. But if it was, I am fairly sure that the underlying animosity would show itself in various forms, which could be very similar to what they did, to what it was at that time. As I said, it's quieting down on a practical level, but I sense and know many the animosity towards me from many quarters, not from all. I mean, there are many who support me, but I got many friends who I've known for decades and who won't look at me, won't talk to me because of the views I've put out.
I don't imagine it would stop you if you did have something you wanted to say imminently. I imagine it wouldn't put you off doing it. Rabbi, thanks for coming on today. Short notice. Nice to hear from you again, and okay. I'll certainly call on you again in the future. Thanks for your time today.
Okay, thank you very much. I wish you much success.
You too, sir. Bye for now. That was Rabbi Ahron Cohen live on the programme today from Salford. Good to have him back after his only other appearance, which is back in 2014. It's Tuesday's Richie Allen Show. The time is 4 minutes to the top of the hour. Keep the tweets coming in. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. That's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Patrick tweets, completely agree with Rabbi Cohen's assessment of Zionism as opposed to the purity of Judaism. I can only assume that governments are not speaking out against the crimes of Israel, partly because they are compromised due to collaborative evil acts. For example, says Patrick, September the 11th there. Hi to Liz Jones. Hi to Spirit Samba. Hi to Ricky, who tweets, love listening to Rabbi Ahron Cohen. What a dignified man. JP in Manchester tweets, Christians, religion, Jews, religion, Muslims, religion. It's faith, not fecking race, he says there. And he did say that at the outset of that chat, did the rabbi. He did intimate that that Judaism is a faith. It is an adopted identity. It isn't it isn't your race. Jews are not a species, no more than Christians are a species, no more than Muslims are a species. He did intimate that was his point of view there. Hi to David Stanford. I think nefarious banking practices and the onset of usury describes it, he says. Gojira tweets, for as long as you don't discuss the origins, the players and the methods for fear of offending certain groups, then this just plays into the hands of the Sabbateans. Just let history repeat itself over and over. Learn effing nothing, says Gojira there. Yeah, well, I could say a lot about that, but I won't. We certainly are not frightened of, or I certainly don't shy away from talking about anything on this programme. Great to hear him there talking about the influence of the Oppenheimer, Warburg, Rothschild, Rockefeller families and their using of the identity. They're using Jewish identity to basically hide behind what Zionism really is, which is ultimately at its core, it's got nothing to do with advancing the cause of, or advancing the cause of Jews in this world in the 20th, 21st century. Nothing to do with it. Paul tweets, brilliant stuff from Rabbi Cohen. There's no question why the other side of his argument doesn't want to debate on your show, Richie. He says there is no argument, he says. They would disagree, Paul, but sadly, certainly on this programme, I found it very difficult to get arch-Zionists to come on this programme to debate me. When I was doing this type of programme in Spain, however, it was far easier to get Zionists to come on the programme. I used to speak with a Zionist from Israel all the time called David Rubin, who used to come on the programme and argue with me about these issues. But when I made a television programme in London, I interviewed Gilad Atzmon, the jazz saxophonist, regular guest on this programme. I interviewed him in a debate with the Zionist David Rubin, and halfway through that live television interview, David Rubin left the Skype interview, walked off the show and refused to ever speak to me ever again. Even though I was far harder on Gilad, I think that interview was on YouTube. I was much harder on Gilad than I was on the Rabbi, than I was on the Zionist David Rubin. Keep the tweets coming in. Stephen Parker tweets, so Jeremy Jezza has caved in. What's the BBC saying about this? This happened, of course, around about 15-20 minutes into the programme. I thought it might do. So I've not had a chance to grab any audio for you. But the BBC is reporting as we approach the top of the hour, 6 p.m. local time here in Manchester, UK, that Labour has adopted a full anti-Semitism definition. Let me read you the story. The UK Labour Party's ruling body has agreed to adopt in full an international definition of anti-Semitism after months of rows. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition was incorporated into Labour's Code of Conduct in July, but not all the examples were concluded. However, the party will now incorporate all the examples according to the National Executive Committee. But, writes the BBC, it will also publish a statement aimed at protecting free speech. This is a statement from Labour. Let me read this. The NEC has adopted all the IHRA examples of anti-Semitism in addition to the IHRA definition which Labour adopted in 2016, alongside a statement which ensures this will not in any way undermine freedom of expression on Israel or the rights of Palestinians. The National Executive Committee, continues the statement, welcomed Jeremy Corbyn's statement to the meeting about action against anti-Semitism, solidarity with the Jewish community and protection of Palestinian rights as an important contribution to the consultation on Labour's Code of Conduct. So will it put an end to all of this nonsense that we've had to bear witness to in recent months, these bogus claims that hatred of Jews is endemic in the Labour Party, when it isn't? Ken Livingstone earlier on saying that even the polls of certain Jewish groups in this country say that you've got about 50 out of 500,000, 50 Egypts tweeting stuff that could be construed to be hateful towards Jews. 50 out of 500,000, it's hardly endemic or proof that there is serious issues with respect to anti-Semitism or the notion that there is an existential threat to Jews in this country. It is, as I said earlier on, in the opinion of myself, it is monumental bollocks. Coming up for 2 minutes past the hour. The Twitter handle for the programme is at Richie Allen Show. Hi to Shona Dryden. How you doing, Shona? Nice to hear from you. Hated school when I was growing up, Richie, but love attending this school, the Richie Allen School, learning so much and thoroughly enjoying your guests. Thanks very much for that, Shona. Nice to hear from you there as well. Hi to David Stanford. Speaking earlier on about the Russian offensive today in Idlib, the bombing, the aerial bombardment of al-Nusra al-Nusra, I suppose you would say bases, Al-Qaeda, ISIS bases in Idlib, and we'll be hearing more about that from Stephen Lendman shortly. David Stanford tweeted, are these head-chopping loony bins a reality or a constructed bogeyman? Wouldn't be the first time, says David. That's right. That's right. But we know that Wahhabism as an idea was introduced by the British Empire. I'm not going to get into all this again because I spoke about it so many times on the programme, as a way to divide and conquer. Bob Stew says Palestine is like a dirty word in the mainstream media. It is, no doubt about it. Hi to Eddie as well. How you doing, Eddie? Hi to Derek and to Gail, wishing us good afternoon. Hi to Kim, who says good to have the Richie Allen Show back. Yesterday's show was great, says Kim, and I'm liking the earlier time slot for the show as well. Thanks so much for that, Kim. Hi to Ricky Emmett as well. 3 minutes past the hour. Shall we have a little bit of music before we welcome Stephen Lendman to the show? Let's do it. Let's have some music. Vanessa Paradis then. Vanessa Paradis, eh? On the Richie Allen Show, 4 minutes past the hour for Tuesday. It's September 4th. Next week will be the September the 11th anniversary. Tell you more about that a bit later. Right, that's Vanessa Paradis on the Richie Allen Show. It's 7.5 minutes past the hour. Tuesday's show. Great to be doing it today. Great to be doing it any day. It's good, the new time slot. It hasn't caused much of a ruction. It hasn't made any waves. I think it suits people. I mentioned yesterday anyway, more than 95, and this is official figures, more than 95% of the overall audience gets the programme when they feel like it on demand. Right, before we hear from Stephen Lendman, I can bring you a little bit of reaction from Labour, the Labour Party, deciding to adopt all of the IHRA examples of anti-Semitism. Couple of minutes ago, Labour's shadow business secretary, a woman called Rebecca Long-Bailey, she's the shadow business secretary, she's a Labour member of Parliament. She came out of that national executive meeting, spoke to Sky News, and this is what she said.
Critical today that we reassure the Jewish community and we're in complete solidarity with the concerns that they'd raised over the last few months. So that's why, as an NEC, we agreed to adopt not just the IRA definition, which was adopted in 2016, but also all of the examples in full. We also sought to reassure our own members that, freedom of speech was not going to be limited. The spirit of IRA and its definitions was never intended to limit that free speech, and we made that clarification today at the meeting to state quite clearly that the intention of IRA isn't to limit discourse on the political situation between Israel and Palestine.
Now, I was told that Jeremy Corbyn had his own statement on this, and that some people felt that went too far, that may have been seen to water down what you're agreeing on the anti-Semitism examples. His statement wasn't agreed. What's the status of that statement now? Is there going to be further consultation on that statement?
Well, no, that's not quite correct. Jeremy made a statement to the NEC, asked the NEC to adopt the IRA definition and examples in full. And as I said, he set out some of the concerns that our members had raised in relation to, limitations on freedom of speech, an issue that was also raised by the Home Affairs Select Committee recently. And he stated, as I've stated, that the intention of IRA and the examples isn't to limit free speech, but we needed to recognise that those concerns had been raised, and we would make sure that there wasn't limitations in freedom of speech in the implementation of the examples themselves.
I'm told there is going to be further consultation though. What are you consulting on?
The code of conduct overall. Now, IRA sets out quite a detailed list of examples, but obviously to have quite a comprehensive and legally robust document with which to implement, action against our members.
Yeah, that goes on a bit. That's Rebecca Long-Bailey. What's interesting about that is that Corbyn made some sort of a statement about free speech, but it wasn't adopted or endorsed by Labour's National Executive Committee. What did Corbyn say? Now, Rebecca Long-Bailey is absolutely wrong when she says that by adopting all of the IHRA examples, Labour isn't limiting free speech. Well, it is. Because what Labour is now saying is, if you claim that the State of Israel is a racist endeavour, you are an anti-Semite. If you compare the actions of the Israeli government and its army against the Palestinians, if you compare those actions, those crimes, with Nazism, you are also anti-Semitic. So this is a total capitulation by the Labour Party and a capitulation by Jeremy Corbyn. What's interesting is we've had reaction to it already. JP in Manchester basically going to renounce, he says, his Labour membership because of the capitulation of the party and its seeming refusal to speak truth to power. This is the Richie Allen Show. Live, as usual. It'll always be live on Fab Radio 2, TuneIn Radio, triggerwarning.tv and richieallen.co.uk. Let's welcome back to the programme an old friend of ours. He's a terrific broadcaster, wonderful journalist, and I've been privileged to have him on this programme and other programmes for many years. It's been quite a while since he was on. You can read him daily at his website, stephenlendman.org. It's must reading. It's a must read every day. I would suggest that you bookmark that website, put it on your menu bar and check out Stephen every day. Stephen Lendman, live in the Windy City. Welcome back to the programme. How are you, sir?
Oh, Richie, great. It's great to be on with you, doing fine. And my goodness, I mean, the world has turned around about a dozen times since you and I were on air together.
It's mental, isn't it? I was speaking to Michael Rivero yesterday, other content creators and journalists in the last few days, and they've said, and my listeners will be bored of this because I've repeated this a few times, this year in particular, there was no silly season. There was no time when writers and broadcasters like yourself, my friend, had nothing to talk about. It's been crazy, right? Do you feel like we're building up to something really serious. Something mega is coming, Stephen.
Well, I'm afraid. I don't know what's going to happen, Richie. Predicting is not an easy thing to do, but I'm very concerned about what's going on. The hardliners, the Neo-con hardliners infesting the Trump regime, they are the most reckless, ruthless bunch I've run into. I think in any U.S. administration, they've been pretty nasty people in previous administrations, especially since the neoliberal 90s, under Bush, Cheney, and under Obama. But I think this bunch running Trump's geopolitical agenda, I think they are the most dangerous and reckless and ruthless of all. I'm scared about what could be coming. I don't know what's coming, but I'm scared that they may be crazy enough to do almost anything, including getting into direct confrontation with Russia and Iran.
You're right to be concerned, and you've earned the right to say that, and you've never peddled fear in your life. I've known you for years. You're a straight up journalist. You're as well briefed as anybody I've ever met, and you don't peddle fear, so that's a startling thing for you to say, but I share your concerns. What we have in Syria at the moment is we have the Assad government, which is on the right side of history, in my opinion. It's in checkmate, isn't it, Steve? It seems to be in checkmate position, or it seems to be in check position, not checkmate, check position. The al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, ISIS lunatics, backed by, sadly, our countries, seem to have, come to the end. And they're in Idlib, and Russian warplanes have apparently bombed Idlib today in advance of a major offensive by the Syrian government. That says to me that the French, British, Israeli and US plans for Syria have failed. Now that should be a cause for celebration, but I fear that they're not going to take it lying down, and that they might be prepared to go for an all-out confrontation with Russia, as you've said. Talk to us about what's happening in Idlib today, Stephen, as you understand it. How close is Assad to winning this once and for all and ending this so-called civil war?
Oh, I wish it could end, Richie. I don't see this thing ending for maybe years. And the examples I like to cite is, look what's happening in Afghanistan, 17 years of war, in Libya, 2011, and there's still endless violence and chaos in the country. Same thing in Iraq. I mean, Iraq is a war zone. People don't talk about it that way, but it is. And America and its imperial allies, including Israel, NATO, Britain, France, they can stoke up violence anywhere in the region or any place else they want. Israel, in the last few days alone, has terror bombed Syrian targets twice. I think overnight they terror bombed the targets again after doing it a few days earlier, which says to me Israel is stoking things up, and I expect a lot more Israeli attacks. We could see U.S. and UK and British attacks. We both know about the possible impending chemical weapons false flag that Russia, I've written about it, Russia has warned about it, held a Security Council session about it, another false flag to blame Syria for something it had nothing to do with if it happens, and it probably will happen. I think Russia slowed it down, didn't stop it, and then America, Britain, and France using this as an excuse to terror bomb Syrian sites, and if it happens, Richie, I think it will be much more intensive than the last time that barely did any damage at all. This time it could be very, very serious. And I fear that what could happen again is there could be some damage or deaths at Russia's military base, its air base, the Kahraman air base. And I don't think Russia wants to attack America or France or Britain or other countries, but I do believe if Russian personnel are attacked on the ground and they're harmed, if they're killed, Russia will retaliate. And what does this mean? There could be a confrontation with the countries Russia is holding responsible for what's happening. It could either happen by accident or by design. We could see ourselves in a major conflict. Good Lord. Is nuclear war possible, Richie?
I hope it isn't, Stephen. And I want to talk more in a minute about the way Vladimir Putin has conducted himself throughout this for the last 8, 9, 10 years. You've gobsmacked me there. I don't want to even imagine that somebody will be stupid enough to launch a nuclear weapon. But I concede that you're probably right when you say if Russian troops are attacked and if there are casualties, Russia would feel probably that it had no other option than to defend itself. Let me play devil's advocate here just for a minute, because I agree with your description and your analysis, I should say, of what's happened in Libya, in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and how it's never ended. There's a difference though. The governments of those countries were sacked, murdered. Saddam Hussein was, judiciously executed, summarily executed. Gaddafi was summarily executed. The difference with Syria is that Bashar al-Assad is still there. He seemingly has the support of broad swathes of the country, if not most of the country. And that might make it more difficult for the unholy alliance of the US, Israel, France and Britain to do what it wants to do. As long as Assad is still there, surely there's more of a chance than we saw in Afghanistan, Libya and Iraq, more of a chance that he could end it sooner rather than later. I'm wrong, right?
Your point is well taken, Richie. There's no question he's still there. There's no question that his support is overwhelming. I still remember vividly June 4th, 2014, he was reelected. I remember the date. I mean, I usually don't remember these dates, but I remember that one. He was overwhelmingly reelected with 89% support. Independent international monitors were there saying the election was open, free, and fair. I mean, to me, that proves clearly that Assad has overwhelming support from the Syrian people. Of course, there are other things going on. There's no question that America and NATO and Israel want regime change. My goodness, what would happen, Richie, if there's an attack on Damascus and they kill Assad? Gaddafi was overwhelmingly supported in Libya. They got rid of him. They could get rid of Assad. America still has, I don't know how many troops in northeastern and southwestern Syria. They're not leaving. I think Defense Secretary Mattis, maybe others have said something to the effect that as long as Assad remains in power, America is not leaving Syria. As long as America is in Syria and intent on regime change, no matter how much support Assad has, there could be endless violence stoked in the country. That's what scares me. I mean, we're in the 8th year of war, despite Russia's all-out efforts to resolve the conflict with Astana and Geneva and Sochi, all of those peace talks. They've really accomplished nothing because America has undermined them. America wants war. America wants regime change. And we see the conflict just going on endlessly. And no matter how many thousands of terrorists are eliminated, they can keep going and recruiting more of these people and bringing them into the country. It scares me how long this thing could go on, Richie.
Yeah, and the Russian Foreign Ministry and Lavrov have been making pointed comments about the sophisticated weaponry that their intelligence tells them that these jihadists in Idlib, they have a seemingly unlimited supply of very sophisticated hardware. Surely people, Stephen, even if they get their news from Sky and Fox News and CNN, surely they must be starting to become more aware of what's really going on here, and asking questions as to, well, where are these guys getting this incredibly sophisticated weaponry? Or are people still so bloody dumbed down that they're just swallowing everything they get from John Bolton, everything they're getting from Fox and CNN? How do you read it? Surely people are starting to wake up to this.
Richie, I think people in Britain and in Europe are much more savvy about some of the things going on. I've made comments in the past that I think people in darkest Africa with no internet connection know more about what's going on in the world than Americans, most Americans, who have every opportunity to be well informed. Anybody who has a computer can know what's going on. They can tune out their television set and not watch that rubbish and get their news from alternative sources. It's so easy to find, Richie. Your program, so many good websites. It's simple to find out good sources. In 15 minutes a day, people could be informed enough to know their government is betraying them. They're waging imperial wars. They're spending their money, using their tax dollars to go around the world massacring people and committing vast destruction. But I think most Americans are so overly entertained and underinformed that they simply don't know what's going on. They don't pay any attention to anything other than the ball scores, the football scores, or whatever is going on. That's what concerns them. That's what interests them. and they don't pay any attention. And if you watch U.S. television, which I just peek at once in a while to see where they're going, it really is an abomination, Richie. There's nothing, it's all Trump this, Trump that, Russia this, Russia that, nothing about the stuff going on in the world, the U.S. imperial wars. So Americans, if they get their news from Fox or CBS or NBC or any of them, they know nothing but the propaganda they're fed.
And you've written very eloquently in recent days about Yemen and the atrocious crimes being committed there by the Saudis at the, with the British government cheerleading by sending them more and more of the weaponry we talked about. How frustrating is it that when I totally understood why people voted for Donald Trump, I didn't blame people, and I didn't suggest or I didn't think they were stupid. Trump said all the right things. Now, you and I have been around the block a few times. We know that these guys come and go. They promise an end to war and they promise prosperity, but they're a pack of liars. They're a gang of thieves, and Trump was never going to be any different. But I understood why people wanted to believe him. He said an end to interventionism, an end to America sending its young men and women overseas to be killed in these unlawful wars and all of that. Now, as uninformed as people are, they know that Trump has embraced Zionism, and they know that Trump wants to escalate things with Syria. So why have Trump's fans or supporters not abandoned him? Why have they jumped into the trench that he's dug? And why are they cheerleading for him even louder than before, Stephen? This is the stubbornness that we've never seen before.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Richie. Even though I saw a poll result, I forget who did it, that Trump's approval rating is at its lowest point, something like 30% or 35%, 36%. So about a third of the country supports him, and something like 60% are against him, and the others don't know what the heck is going on. They're either for or against. But at the same time, people simply don't pay attention to what's going on. They don't know what's going on. You would think people would be angry, Richie, that their tax dollars that they have to fork out in withholding taxes and in filings once a year, or retired as I am, I have to file quarterly income tax reports and give my money. I mean, if I didn't give it, they come and arrest me and put me in prison. But I have to give my money that goes for waging wars in multiple theaters. You would think people would, at least to some extent, know something is wrong. I mean, they're giving big tax cuts to rich people. They're spending my money on wars around the world. And what are they doing for me? They're doing nothing for me whatsoever. But yet Americans are just I don't know what the word is, whether it is partly uninformed and partly seem to be indifferent with this stuff, concerned more with their daily affairs. In one respect, I understand it, because when I was working and supporting a family, the number one thing on my mind was bringing a paycheck home, taking care of my family, raising my kids. Those are the dominant things in my mind. I didn't have the time I have now to spend, aside from my writing, but to spend time going to alternative sources. I didn't even have a computer, Richie, until I was 870. My daughter finally convinced me to get one, and it changed my life. I think most people in America, when they use the internet and the computer for whatever, they go on social media, they email their friends, they do stuff like that. They don't try to find out what's going on in the country and go on in the world. I don't know what's in their mind, but the polls, I think what the polls really show, Richie, is if propaganda is pounded into the heads of American people incessantly enough, it can get them to believe almost anything.
Yeah, it's an avalanche of it. We see it here. News, 24-hour television news has become basically a soap opera, a serial drama, daily played out there, to engage people in it. It's something I've written about and talked about on this program for a long time, as you have. StephenLendman.org is Stephen's website. Check it out. I'll tweet a link to it in a minute. I know you know about the website, but if you haven't been on there before, get on there. Just before we talk briefly about Iran, and I know that your time is precious, so I won't keep you all day. Thanks for coming on again today, Stephen. Just before we talk about Iran and where Iran figures in what's happening, Trump sunk to a new low when he said that he was going to cancel Palestinian aid and aid to Gaza. That was pretty reprehensible, Stephen, right?
Oh, absolutely. Pulling out of the nuclear deal, that was pretty awful. Canceling all aid. I don't know if there's any remaining aid to the Palestinian Authority. I know $200 million were cut. I don't think there's very much U.S. aid remaining. There may be a little, but all U.S. aid to the UNWRA, the refugee area, all of it gone. America supplied about 1/3 of the agency's money taking care of Palestinians, humanitarian aid for Palestinians. It's all gone. Europe and some other countries have vowed to increase their contributions. Whether it's enough to make up for the shortfall, I don't know. What will happen next year, I don't know. The whole scheme, what's going on is Netanyahu has convinced Trump to say there are no Palestinian refugees except a few 100,000, not 5.5 million. So they cannot return to their homeland because they don't exist. That's the scheme. That's why they're cutting off the aid. Well, they very much do exist. International law says so. The UN Charter says so. The Convention on I forget the exact terminology. The Convention on Refugees, I think it is, says so. I mean, there are 5.5 million Palestinian refugees externally and internally in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and in Gaza, and they very much exist. But the millions outside of the territories, they absolutely, under international law, have the right to return to their homeland, and there's nothing the Trump regime could do to undermine that law except prevent them from coming back, which America and Israel wants to do. And they're concocting this phony business saying they don't exist. Well, they do exist, but U.S. aid to UNWRA, that's gone. And I think it's gone forever as long as Trump remains in office.
Yeah, and the Israelis keep barricading the Palestinians in. They're preventing people coming overseas with aid. The blockade, endures, and we get kind of mealy-mouthed criticism from politicians that doesn't mean anything. I think you've hit the nail on the head. The Zionist plan is to kill as many Palestinians as they can and make life so unbearable for the rest that they'll just leave. It's sickening, and we talk a lot about it, as you write about it. Finally, and very importantly, obviously Trump tweeting incessantly about what's happening in Syria, warning the Iranians not to get involved. Iran is obviously very concerned about the plight of the Assad government and the future of Syria, because Iran believes, quite rightly. Now, Stephen, of course, is a regular contributor to Press TV and RT. No better man than Stephen Lendman to comment on this. He knows more about this situation than anybody. The Iranians believe that if Syria falls, Iran is next. That's true. How serious is that? And how, if this rolls on and on and on and on, with no resolution, with the Assad government hanging on, with the unholy alliance of Israel, France, Britain and US sending more and more and more money and weapons to these guys, how likely is it that Iran will be dragged into it in some way, or that there might be some accusation levelled at Iran that might see, bombing missions carried out inside Iran by the Israelis that could escalate this whole thing? Talk to us about Iran and the Zionist Neo-con plans for that country, Stephen.
Well, you got it exactly right, Richie. Iran is very concerned, and so am I, that if Syria falls, that it will be targeted next. It's already being targeted. The phrase I like to use is the road to Tehran runs through Damascus. You take out Assad, you turn Syria into a U.S. vassal state, you isolate Iran, and then you go full throttle for regime change in Iran. That's been the U.S. plan for almost 40 years. Trump, I think, wants it more intensively than his predecessors, but Iran has survived for, it'll be 40 years next mid-year or so. Iran has survived, but the possibility of a U.S. war on Iran is very real. Israel's war minister, I don't call him a defense minister, war minister Avigdor Lieberman made a comment, I think Netanyahu made the same comment, that Israel reserves the right to attack Iran wherever it exists in the region, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Iraq, Iranian territory, and of course Israel has nuclear weapons. Good Lord, would Israel dare attack Iran with nuclear weapons? I would say probably not, but anything is possible by those lunatics in Israel, and maybe the Trump hotliners are just as crazy as the Israelis. I fear greatly there could be a war on Iran, and there definitely is destabilization of the country going on now. I think if this scheme to destabilize the country and achieve regime change isn't achieved that way, very possibly we could see a war on Iran, and that would be the mother of all wars in the Middle East. And if Russia, Richie, went to the aid of Syria, I would think it would go to the aid of Iran, and we could see a U.S.-Russian confrontation. When I say the possibility of nuclear war, I've quoted the former U.S. Admiral Hyman Rickover, founder of America's nuclear navy in 1982, I believe it was, in testimony before Congress saying, when nations go to war with each other, they'll use any weapons they have in their arsenal to win. If nuclear powers go to war with each other and can't defeat the other conventionally, does that mean they'll use nuclear weapons? I think the possibility exists. I can't say that they will, but I think the possibility exists. And I like to go back to the Rickover quote that they will use any weapons in their arsenal to win. And we know Russia and America are the two dominant nuclear powers with maybe 95% of all the nuclear weapons in the world. Just imagine if something like that happens. And the phrase I like to use is by accident or design. Well, that'll doom us all, Richie, if that happens.
You know, it's the right place to leave our conversation today. I can't but do anything but agree with you. You're right, and the sad thing is, nearly every working Joe, or probably every working Joe and every working Josephine in the world, would be totally against any such eventuality, but they are blissfully unaware that they are ruled by stone cold psychopaths. And that's the way it is, Stephen. Thanks for coming on today. Folks, do yourself a favour. StephenLendman.org is a fantastic website. Stephen writes brilliant articles there. As I said, very, very thought-provoking and brilliantly briefed articles there. Check him out on YouTube too. His interviews on RT, Press TV, many other networks as well. Great to have you on, Stephen. Thanks for giving us your time today. And I look forward to hearing from you again in the future.
Richie, thank you so much. You're a great friend and a valued ally.
Thanks for that, Stephen. Lovely to hear from you. Stephen Lendman, live on The Richie Allen Show this Tuesday, September 4th. It is StephenLendman.org. Get on the website and bookmark it. He's a prolific writer, Stephen, and his articles never lose any quality. They get better and better. And it's the sort of information, as I said, you're not going to get anywhere else. StephenLendman.org. Great to have Stephen back on the programme. It's 25 minutes to the top of the hour. Now, here's an interesting one that I was going to get into last night on the programme, but I ran out of time. But I found it interesting, and I thought, will I cover this today or won't I? Because, you know, people might say, oh, well, it's yesterday's news, Richie, but it isn't yesterday's news, because it goes on. Stella Creasy is a Labour MP, Stella Creasy, and she wants to change the law so that misogynistic behaviour will be treated and will be labelled as a hate crime. So she wants to amend a law. Now, the law she wants to amend is the upskirting law. There are Egypts out there, Egypts, who will go around and stick a camera, usually on their smartphones, under a woman's skirt and will try and take a picture of her. Now, these guys should have the shit kicked out of them. They should be charged for it. They should be prosecuted, and they should be fined, and repeat offenders should go to prison. Right. Believe it or not, that's the way it is already. There is a law against upskirting. You can't do that. It's a gross invasion of privacy, and it's a sexual assault. It's dreadful. Right. There's a law against it. But new legislation is going through Parliament about upskirting anyway, even though it already is against the law to do it. It's against the law to do it. So what does Stella Creasy want to do? She wants to amend new legislation that bans taking unsolicited pictures under someone's clothing. She wants to amend it. And her amendment would mean that if you were convicted of upskirting, you could get a tougher sentence if the judge ruled that your upskirting was motivated by misogyny. Now, this is monumental bollocks, this. On a scale of monumental bollocks that I didn't even think existed. So MPs members of Parliament are going to consider this draft legislation tomorrow, where if you're convicted of upskirting, if the judge rules that you're upskirting, which is bad enough anyway, perverted fuckers, excuse my language, should be doing that. But a judge could say, oh, it was actually motivated by misogyny, so you get a tougher sentence. What's going on? Well, I've taken the liberty of splicing up the Stella Creasy interview with Sky News from yesterday. As far as snowflakes go, no, I'm not going to editorialise. I'm going to say nothing for a minute. This is Stella Creasy explaining this folly, this lunacy to Sky News yesterday afternoon.
Right now, if somebody targets you because you're a woman in the workplace, there are protections against that, but not if you're out and about on the streets. And most women will tell you that they have experienced street harassment and indeed sexual violence on the streets of our country at all different points in their lives.
What? Most women, she said, will tell you that they've experienced... Well, don't let me repeat it. Let's hear what she said again.
Most women will tell you that they have experienced street harassment and indeed sexual violence on the streets of our country at all different points in their lives.
That's just patently bollocks. I mean, if you're the presenter... Now, you see, presenters should be completely objective and have no bias. And in the old days, dear listener, presenters waited and waited and waited for glorious opportunities like that, presented by an airhead like Stella Creasy. Presenters waited and waited and waited, and then one day you got the jackpot. An empty-headed monumental muppet like Stella Creasy would say something as patently ridiculous as what she just said there. That most women have experienced sexual harassment or sexual violence on the streets at some point in their lives or another. But of course we don't live in an era of presenters who are objective and whom are intelligent and who love to hammer politicians. We don't get that anymore. We don't get it. I mean, whatever you think of Jeremy Paxman, you might say, oh, establishment, Richie, BBC. Paxman would have annihilated her there, as I would have done. I'm not comparing myself to Jeremy Paxman. It's obvious that I'm a far more credible presenter than I jest than Jeremy Paxman. Anyway, she said it. Women, every woman, nearly every woman has experienced it. But of course the presenter doesn't jump in. What else does Stella Creasy say?
What we're trying to do is say that where there is somebody, and upskirting is a classic example of this, of that kind of hostility and aggression towards women that thinks that you are entitled to take pictures up their skirts, where somebody is doing that.
You see, I think the upskirter is just a dirty little bastard, a pervert, who's committing a crime. He's a filthy-minded little twerp, and should be prosecuted for it. But what's this about hostility and hatred against women? She's trying to make women a minority group who can't stand up for themselves and can't kick the upskirter in the short and curlies and report him or her to the relevant authorities. Why try and attach misogyny to this? Well, let's hear a bit more of what Stella Creasy has to say.
And they're doing that in a very explicitly hostile fashion. And the court should be able to extend the same protections that we do to people for being harassed for their religious or their racial or their sexuality background when it comes to sentencing, to recognise that kind of hatred and put it on an equal setting with other forms of hatred.
You see, she wants to now say, she wants women to be categorised as a group that is hated, like LGBT folks, like black, Asian folks, other minorities. She wants women now to be a victim group on the same pedestal as all these other groups, and anything that's done against a woman, any slight, any offence given to, or any crime, because upskirting is a crime committed against a woman, that has to be categorised as a hate crime. Hostility. I would have seen the upskirter as some grubby little sneaky guy trying to get away with it. The upskirter wants to take the illicit photograph, not be discovered, and then run away to do whatever he wants to do with that photograph. Dirty little bastard, as I said. I have to repeat that. But where's the hate crime coming into it? Anyway, what else did Stella Creasy say about this?
Well, look, the bill is going to go through Parliament anyway because there's widespread support for recognising...
Yes, the bill's going to go through Parliament anyway, even though it doesn't need to, because upskirting is a crime already. You see, we live in this crazy world, folks. It's crazy. It is already a crime to take a picture under a woman's skirt. It always has been. Why they're legislating for something which has already been legislated for in the past, I have no idea. Well, I do. I do have an idea. But I'd be here all day explaining why I think this is going on. So she wants to attach an amendment to give the judiciary, to give judges, to give magistrates the ability, the right to say, oh, I think the upskirting was motivated by hate crime against women, by misogyny, therefore we should extend the sentence. She's as mad as a box of frogs, is Stella Creasy.
Recognising that upskirting should be considered a crime. What we're...
It is a crime.
Trying to do is say, actually, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. That hostility towards women doesn't just come in the form of upskirting.
Nonsense. Utter nonsense. There's always been perverts spying on women. Peeping Toms up trees. I saw Back to the Future. Men in the dark, on streets, looking up at bedroom windows. It's gone on forever. Right. It isn't new.
It comes in the forms of the harassment that women face just walking about. You know, it shouldn't be that you and I, Tom, can't walk down the same street without equally being free to walk where we like, go where we like.
Oh, Jesus. Women, please. You know, I have a very... My audience is pretty much 50-50, according to all the statistics, between men and women. If I'm wrong, please tell me I'm wrong. Come on the show. Am I wrong? Is it true that women can't walk from here to there without some guy mooning at her, or shaking his tallywhacker at her, or trying to take pictures of her, or trying to touch her? Is that reality in Britain in 2018, is it? Because I don't see it. But then I'm a big ignorant baldy bastard. Maybe I don't see it because I'm an ignoramus. Am I wrong? I don't think I'm wrong. I don't think women are subject to harassment non-stop out on the street.
But sadly, that's the case in modern Britain. So, absolutely, at the moment, this is just looking at upskirting. But what we're really hoping, and the Law Commission has shown that it is supportive of this, is that we can review hate crime so that we extend that equal protection that we do, as I say, in the workplace to women out in the streets. Where they've treated misogyny as a hate...
I know what you're thinking, dear listener. You're thinking, where is the presenter to put a halt to that bollocks? Please. Ms. Creasy, are you serious, or is it April Fool's Day? Am I really listening to this? Anyway, the presenter does ask her, if it's already a crime to stick a camera under a woman's skirt, what's your problem?
The trouble is it is a crime, so already it is...
Right, it is a crime, so what then, Stella?
Something that should be tackled, but all too often what we're hearing, particularly from women, is when they go to report this, they get told it's not a crime, that it's not serious, that maybe somebody was joking around and they shouldn't take it so seriously. Well, if you are frightened, and I hear countless stories from women who just feel frightened, you can't...
Anecdotal bullshit. She said that women are reporting and it isn't being taken seriously. Again, the presenter must interject and say, give me an example. Please give me an example of a crime report. I want the crime report number, please, so that I, as a journalist, can investigate it. Tell me who the investigating officer was. Tell me the name of the officer who took the complaint from the woman and who then dismissed it and laughed at her and didn't take it seriously. This is anecdotal crap in the post-fact world where facts and truth mean nothing. Because you can say whatever you want. No presenter, no journalist, no reporter will interject and say, stop right there. Who are all these women that keep coming up to you, Stella, to say I can't walk down the street without being harassed? This is crap. Utter crap.
You can't even walk down a street without a group of men making comments or attacking you.
Where is this happening? Where? I want to see it.
Actually, that is something we should be dealing with because it's leaving people having their lives curtailed.
It's leaving people having their lives curtailed? Women's lives are being curtailed. The average life expectancy of a woman has dropped from 76 to 58. Why? Because of grubby little bastards making comments on building sites. What sort of a world are we giving to our children? Honest to God, won't somebody please think of the children? Wow! This is madness, right? What else do we get from Creasy?
So although you can report it, and we encourage women to report it to 101 so that you can track where this is happening, the bitter reality is it doesn't get taken seriously in the same way that we do take seriously racial and religiously motivated hate. And actually, I'm very struck by the fact that both Stonewall and Tell Mama and the Fawcett Society and disability charities are also backing our call to have this equal approach and have this review of hate crime so that we are getting laws that make sense for the 21st century.
Hate crime. Let's label everything a hate crime. Let's introduce tougher sentencing. I'm just going to leave that there. That is as insane a story I think I will report on this autumn, this coming autumn. And the fact that the media is going along with this, the fact that she is supported by larger and larger groups of women and men, the hysterical progressives that have taken over social media, who think this is all a great idea. You know, let's have a race to the bottom to see who's the biggest victim. We're victims. Women are not victims. I am in a 16-year relationship with an amazing woman who would laugh in the face of being catcalled by some man on a street in Manchester, would laugh, would have a go back at him, would give him a few choice words in jest. She wouldn't collapse in offence. She wouldn't melt down and feel that she was assaulted, that the core fibre of her being was damaged because somebody said something. She'd give it back just as bad or as hard as she got it. Women are not victims. This is a lie. This idea that she said at the very beginning, nearly every woman has experienced serious sexual harassment or sexual assault on UK streets. Therefore, we must introduce a new crime. We must make misogyny a defined legal hate crime. Where does that all lead? Where does that all lead? That leads to fairly harmless, old-fashioned idiots who think that a woman's place is in the kitchen, being prosecuted for saying stuff like that. There's some dope who says women should be in the kitchen, they shouldn't be on the radio. Women shouldn't be running companies. Women shouldn't be doing that. There are men, presumably older men, who think that. Let them think it. They're entitled to think it. We're entitled to speak to them and argue with them and laugh and joke and take the piss out of them. But where this all leads, it leads to people not being able to say anything for fear that somebody will say, you hateful bastard, you've committed a crime. There is a new law for that. You're going to be fined. You're going to be sent to prison or whatever. This is crazy, folks, and I'm not fear-mongering. This is Tuesday's Richie Allen Show. The time is running out. Let's take a quick break. Back in a minute with more.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
There's a place place, high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
Really good comment from Seb there. Seb says, Richie, I'm tall and on occasion get the same kind of comments on the street, in pubs and supermarkets. Hate crime, laugh out loud, says Seb. Billy Joel was at Old Trafford Football Stadium back in June. You might remember me telling you, the future Mrs. Allen and myself went. Now, it was a beautiful day and we got to the ground early. We parked up around the corner, got to the ground early, and we actually came in by Talbot Road. So we came in by the Old Trafford Cricket Stadium, which is very close to, obviously, the Old Trafford Football Stadium. And as we were walking past the Cricket Stadium, a gentleman jumped out and he said, do you want to come in for the last few overs of Lancashire versus Yorkshire? Now, I'm a huge cricket fan. And I said, oh yeah, why not? The guy was very good. What they were doing was they were trying to get people to go in, watch a few overs of cricket and also have a beer. Very savvy, the Lancashire County Cricket folks. So we went in because it was still an hour and a half, 2 hours to the concert anyway. And we had seats. We weren't standing, we had seats. So in we went and we sat down alongside a load of lads. And they'd come down from Bolton. And they'd come down from Bolton because one of their friends was making his debut for Lancashire in county cricket in the championship in the 5-day game. Right. So naturally enough, the lads had a few beers. So they started in on me because I'm Irish, obviously. And they started in on the future Mrs. Allen. And we just laughed at them. We had a bit of banter with them. We started giving it back to them. And in the end, people were buying each other drinks. But take offence. What's going on with people? What's going on? Take offence. Wow. David tweets, being an utter arsehole and liking X Factor should be a crime. Like, he says as well, should be a hate crime. Hatred against humanity to be watching that sort of crap. Let me scroll on down. Hi to These Are the Damned as well. Liz says it's an agenda and it's worrying. These Are the Damned tweets, I'm a bald, brummy guy, I believe, and I've been called bald. I wish to report a hate crime, he says. But you see, that is funny, but that is the inevitable progression. That is where it goes. Where me, as a tall, lanky, baldy Irish guy, in the future can report somebody for taking the piss out of me on the street and calling me Moby, which I get called sometimes at sporting events because I wear my glasses and I shave my head. I shave my head with the straight razor. I shave it right down because I'm not vain. And I just shave it all down, right? Rather than have the Friar Tuck thing going on, right? So sometimes people call me Moby. I just laugh. Yeah, it's not as if I haven't heard that one before, pal. And I just walk on by. But the way it's going, I'll be able to go to a police station in the future and say that I've been harassed. It's crazy. Let's not have any more of it, eh? Let's not have any more of it. Massive thanks to Rabbi Ahron Cohen today. What a man. And what can you say about Stephen Lendman? Real journalism, a rarity, a scarcity in this world. That was Tuesday's Richie Allen Show. Join me again tomorrow, Wednesday, at 5 p.m. UK time. This programme will be on podcast, Podomatic, in about 15 to 20 minutes time. And I will start repeating it on the players real soon as well. Look after yourselves and one another. Let's finish the programme with the Mavericks. Alrighty, speak tomorrow then at 5. Remember, 5 p.m. the new time. Stay in touch with richieallen.co.uk. Check out triggerwarning.tv this evening from 10:30. Hayden will be recording the latest episode of the Trigger Warning podcast. Top man is Hayden. And Graham as well. Great stuff. I endorse that programme. Triggerwarning.tv, 10:30 UK time this evening. The Mavericks closing us out, Dancing in the Moonlight. Bye.